Welcome to another episode of MobiCon Academy. Today I'd like to talk to you about the difference between near side and far side traffic signals. So, whether traffic signals should be placed before or after the intersection. This may seem like a trivial difference, but the placement of traffic signals can actually have a significant effect on the operations of an intersection. I'm going to talk a bit about the advantages and disadvantages of both options, using the Netherlands and Ontario as examples. In the Netherlands, traffic signals are typically placed near side, meaning that they're placed before the intersection that they control. In North American jurisdictions such as Ontario, the traffic signals are typically placed on the far side of the intersection, which means they're located after the intersection that they control. But what exactly is a near side traffic signal? A signal placed all the way before the entire intersection is definitely near side, and a signal placed all the way beyond the intersection is obviously far side. But what about the space in between? The Ontario Traffic Manual defines a far side signal as a signal placed more than halfway through the intersection. In the end, the Ontario Highway Traffic Act requires that each signal has at least 2 signal heads located on the far side of the intersection. Though if desired, additional auxiliary heads can be placed on the near side. The Netherlands Traffic Signal Law defines near side signals as those placed before the intersection, though they can be placed beyond the crosswalk or the bike crossing. Whereas Ontario requires traffic signals to be placed on the far side of the intersection, the Netherlands forbids traffic signals from being placed on the far side of the intersection. There's a couple details I'd like to point out about this, which are that in Ontario, a far side signal doesn't actually need to be all the way across the intersection, and in the Netherlands, a near side signal doesn't need to be right at the stop line. It's also particularly interesting that the jurisdictions have exactly the opposite guidance from each other, with far side signals being required in Ontario and forbidden in the Netherlands. When we look at the advantages and disadvantages of the two options, we'll see how the two jurisdictions asked the same question and came to the opposite answer. The main ways that the signal placement affects the intersection operation are in terms of the interpretation of the signals, the visibility of the signals, and the effects on stopping positions. First, I'll talk about the interpretation of the traffic signals. The intent of a traffic signal is to give road users permission to enter the intersection, or in other words, to cross the stop line. It's a common misconception that the signal tells you how long you have to cross the intersection, but that's not true in Ontario or in the Netherlands. In both jurisdictions, the yellow light only gives you enough time to reach the stop bar at a constant speed if you're too close to the intersection to stop safely. The time you need to travel through the intersection is provided after the light turns red and before the next conflicting directions get a green. That time, known as the red clearance time, is visually indistinguishable from the red duration which exists to prevent conflicting traffic movements. So at intersections where it takes a very long time to cross, the presence of traffic signals on the far side of the intersection can actually lead to confusion for some road users. Take, for example, a long crossing which takes 10 seconds for a bicycle to cross. If there's only one bicycle waiting, it should be possible to just provide a few seconds of green, a couple seconds of yellow, and then enough red clearance time to get the bicycle across the intersection. But the problem is that if there's a signal on the far side of the intersection, it will change to red long before the bicycle actually reaches the far side of the intersection, which feels very wrong to road users. This may cause the cyclist to complain to the road authority, saying that the light isn't actually long enough when in fact it actually is, or other road users might incorrectly believe that the cyclist is running a red light. In the Netherlands, the CROV Traffic Signal Handbook's rationale for not permitting signals to be placed on the far side of an intersection is that that would be inconsistent with the meaning of the traffic signal, namely that people are allowed to pass the stop line. As a result, the traffic signal heads should be placed near the stop line. Traditionally, pedestrian signals have been placed on the far side of the intersection in the Netherlands, but increasingly they are also being placed on the near side. A common argument for placing traffic signals on the far side of an intersection is so that drivers who are waiting for a gap in traffic to turn left know when the light is going to end. But while this feels natural for drivers, it's not actually necessary. Drivers waiting in the intersection to turn left need to wait for a gap in oncoming traffic or for that traffic to stop, regardless of the color of the light. In the absence of far side signals, drivers simply need to watch the traffic, When there are far side signals, though, drivers tend to assume that when the light changes to yellow, the oncoming traffic will start to stop. And this can lead to collisions for a couple of reasons. First of all, just because you see a yellow light doesn't necessarily mean that oncoming traffic sees a yellow light. This is known as the yellow trap, where drivers incorrectly assume that oncoming traffic has a yellow light when in fact they don't. For this reason, there are a lot of restrictions about when lights can change to yellow in Ontario, in order to prevent the yellow trap from occurring. But this limits the flexibility in the signal timings. In the Netherlands, the yellow trap does not exist, because drivers waiting to turn left can't see the signals anyway. And even if the yellow lights are simultaneous in opposing directions, having signals on the far side of the intersection increases the chance of error for drivers waiting to turn left. When they see a yellow light, they're more likely to assume that the oncoming traffic is stopping, which increases the chance of them misjudging whether oncoming traffic will stop, or in fact whether it intends to proceed through the yellow light, or even the red light. The second area of differentiation is in terms of the visibility of the traffic signals. Both options have advantages and disadvantages. Visibility is one of the main complaints that drivers have when using intersections with near-side traffic signals. Many drivers complain that they need to look quite far up if they're first in queue waiting for the light to change to green, and their view of the traffic signal may even be blocked by the roof of their car. This is certainly a valid concern, and so both the Ontario Traffic Manual and the COV Traffic Signal Handbook have restrictions on where signals can be placed in order to prevent this issue. The Ontario Traffic Manual recommends placing signals at least 12 meters beyond the stop line. The Dutch regulations also require signals placed over the roadway to be placed at least 12 meters beyond the stop line, although they can be as little as 8 meters beyond the stop line in urban areas, combined with a lower installation height. When signals are installed beside the roadway, they can be a lot closer to the stop line without creating visibility issues because they're closer to eye level. The Dutch regulations allow signals beside the roadway to be as little as 3 meters beyond the stop line, and signals above the roadway which are duplicated by signals beside the roadway can also be as little as 3 meters beyond the stop line, since the first driver in queue can just look at the signal beside the roadway and doesn't actually need to see the overhead signal. It's also possible to place signals too far from the stop line. If the signals are too far away, drivers may not be able to clearly see them, for example, to distinguish which direction they apply to. In the Netherlands, signals need to be placed within 20 meters of the stop line. Ontario is a lot less strict in this respect, since they allow signals to be as much as 55 meters away from the stop line. At large intersections in Ontario, additional auxiliary traffic signals are often placed on the near side to help address this issue. This helps resolve the issue of the signals being too far away, though it does increase the visual clutter at the intersection. Placing signals on the near side of the intersection makes them more visible by bringing them closer to the approaching drivers. It also makes it easier to use the placement of the signal to clearly identify the road user group to whom it applies. For this reason, some North American jurisdictions exclusively use near-side traffic signals at intersections which meet at a narrow angle, such as this interchange in Dorval, Quebec. One of the clearest benefits of placing signals exclusively on the near side of intersections is the effect that it has on enforcing stopping positions. If drivers stop too far forward, they won't be able to see the signal anymore. This reduces the chance of a driver stopping too far forward and thereby obstructing the crosswalk. This is obviously a benefit to pedestrians, but there's also a hidden benefit to motorists as well. If signals are exclusively on the near side of intersections, it's possible to take into account what's known as entry time when calculating the clearance time between two signal phases. In effect, it means that you can take into account the time it takes to get from the stop line to the conflict area in the intersection when you're calculating how much time you need to provide as all red time between two signal phases. With far side signals, this is also possible to some extent, but you do need to take into account the chance that a driver stopped too far forward, and as a result, the time it takes them to get from their stopping position to the conflict area will be shorter. The end result is that placing signals exclusively on the near side of intersections can help reduce the all-red clearance time, thereby increasing the capacity of the intersection. The decision between near side and far side signals typically doesn't actually come into intersection designs because there are pretty well established standards on both sides of the ocean. Traffic signals in North America are on the far side of the intersection, while traffic signals in Europe are on the near side of the intersection. And if one of those two places were to adopt the opposite standard, It would be an enormous expense to relocate every traffic signal on the continent. But maybe we don't have to. Because despite people's intuition that using a near-side signal in an environment which predominantly uses far-side signals would be confusing, there are many intersections in North America which already exclusively use near-side signals, and most people don't even notice, let alone get confused. Based on that experience, I find that the Ontario Traffic Manual is a bit excessively strict when it comes to the placement of signals on the far side of the intersection. Even in North America, there's no need for signals to specifically be more than halfway through the intersection. They just need to be far enough away from the stop line that you can clearly see them when you're waiting at a red light. Allowing the primary signal heads to be placed less than halfway through the intersection would really open up a lot of opportunities at large intersections to make the signals more visible, to make it clearer to whom each signal applies, and even to improve the intersection efficiency by reducing the red clearance time where it's possible to do so safely. I didn't go into that much detail here about clearance times, but there's a link in the description to a video which goes into a bit more detail on that topic. I hope you enjoyed this quick discussion about the placement of traffic signals. It's a small detail, but it can have a big effect on people's behavior at intersections.